Hey guys, today's story is about a D&D group that pitched some tents. The following was awful, even for stupid, horny teenager standards. I, being about 16 at the time, was part of a D&D group with a couple of friends, and I almost always played with my best mates, Garfield and Newman. That summer, however, I went with my family to a coastal city with the largest beach in my country. My parents rented a small apartment, and I had a whole 2 weeks to screw about. My parents were super lax, and they let me do whatever I wanted with my time, as long as I kept them in the loop. I spent mornings at the beach, mostly by myself, but on the 3rd or 4th day, I decided to hit the arcades. This was during the late 90s. And there, I met some other dudes playing Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter, which was the hottest thing at the time. After burning through all our tokens, we had a talk. They were locals and they were organizing a two-way game that weekend. I inquired further and was invited. Awesome. The rest of the week I spent most of the days with those two guys, and they seemed okay. We'll call one of them Blonde, and the other one Black, because that's what they were. We would hang around the arcade, drinking box wine, smoking cigarettes, and generally just be brats. Black was chill. Possibly the chillest dude I had ever met. Everything was fine with him, and he already had adopted this dozed Matt LeBlanc demeanor, before even Matt LeBlanc did. Blonde was the more explosive guy. He would try to pick fights with the other kids in the area, and sometimes just seemed unhinged. But he was a really funny character, and I never learned if they were a bit younger or older than I. So eventually game night came. I told my parents that I would spend the night out, and Blonde and Black took me to Specs' room. Specs had specs, hence the name. He looked like he was about the same age as us, and he was going to DM for us. So I quickly rolled my character to join the ongoing party of 2, and I wanted to make an elven rogue, but the guys egged me on making a beefy fighter. Also, did I mention that we were loading up on box wine pretty hard? Anyway, I was at the same tavern that Blonde and Black were chilling in, having their downtime. We made a quick introduction and were swiftly railroaded into a quest. A quest to attack a bandit camp and save a captive woman. Cool. The game so far at this point was okay. It was a little bit rushed for my tastes, but it was fine. Combat was fair, except for being 2E, and the accursed Zflocco system. And after a random encounter, we reached the camp. We failed our sneak checks, and we had a face-off with the masked bandits. We were outnumbered, so I was about to try some diplomacy. But Specs said something along the lines of, "The bandit leader comes forward. It's a human woman with..." Insert thorough and generous body description. She approaches Nemanev as she removes her mask, revealing a pierced nose. She then produces a dagger and swiftly cuts the front straps of her leather jerkin, exposing her large breasts, with piercings in her nipples that match her nose. We were already 3 sheets to the wind at this point, and despite not being one for sexy RP, I was pretty chill with everything. Black was his usual chill self. Blonde, however, wasn't. Blonde's caster stepped forward and began playing with the lower piercings. So I took another swig of wine and decided to fade into the background, as Specs and Blonde began RPing some raunchy crap. And then I noticed it. Blonde was pitching a tent. I made some joke to try to get the game to get back on track, though my level of discomfort wasn't still a match for my level of drunkenness. Black then opened his mouth to make a short intervention. Cool, let's see if with his input we can drop the sexy... Nope, his character joined in on the inevitable bandit orgy. Lovely. I totally zoned out with this, still not being super uncomfortable, but definitely not going to get into it either. Then I noticed Blonde was rubbing his bulge in what I guess was his drunken notion of subtlety. Specs seemed really pleased with the effect his game was having. And then I looked at Black. And, oh no, he was rubbing his bulge too. I looked away and dedicated to drinking more wine. For a while, I didn't pay any attention at all. I was disgusted, but too drunk to move. And then I heard it. "If we close our eyes, it's not really gay." And that's all I needed to hear. I sprung up and gathered my stuff to leave. Specs stood up and told me that it was getting really late to leave, as I could get mugged or worse in the area we were currently at, which was 100% true. He took me aside and apologized for the turn of events. I asked him if this is normal, and he replied that this was the first time that it was going to happen. So this was going to happen? Really? And I asked him as much. He said that he would let the boys do whatever they wanted, and that his games were open-ended and some other bullcrap nonsense that I fortunately can't recall. I told him I wasn't going to stand and watch that stuff go down. He apologized again and offered to quietly put me in his sister's bedroom next door. She wasn't in the city at the time, and if I was quiet, I could crash there. So I took him up on the offer. I really wanted to leave, but staying was the smartest thing that I could do with my limited brain power. Specs took me to the next room, and I laid on the bed and closed my eyes. Fortunately, I was drunk enough to fall asleep almost instantly. But then, a little while later, I woke up, still drunk, and I could hear some soft moans from Specs' room. So I covered my head with my pillow and eventually dozed off again. The next morning, I had a massive hangover, and I peeked into Specs' room and he was up, playing on his computer. Blonde and Black were laying on the floor, completely passed out. Fortunately, they were clothed. Specs brought me my stuff and let me out of the house. He was still apologetic, and I guess that he knew that it was wrong to drag an unwilling person into this mess, and he was very polite. He even then went so far as to give me some money to get a cab ride back, which, with my splitting headache, I was grateful for. I wouldn't go as far as saying Specs was a decent guy, but if he wasn't as considerate, I don't know what kind of depths this horror story would have reached. I never went back to the arcade Blonde and Black frequented, and I never saw them again. I spent the rest of the vacation closer to my parents, in part because, chill as they were a little concerned by my wino hangover. I guess I was also a little jarred by the whole experience and felt better being in a bit of a normal family setting for a change. I was good at getting myself in trouble at that age. And just to have some thoughts and clarifications on this story. First of all, I want to make it clear that I'm not a homophobe. I wasn't against 2 or 3 dudes fondling each other. I just don't want to be dragged into that. And also, thinking back, I'm not really sure that any of these guys were actually gay. I think they were horny and drunk. Although, I don't know about Specs. I'm not even sure what his role in the whole thing was. And I don't feel like giving it much thought either. Now I'm almost 40, and I'm a really normal dude. I have a job, a wife, and trying to get a kid. I think back about those years, and I can't believe how often and how close I got to really weird and sometimes dangerous situations. A lot of them were, like this one, somewhat connected to TTRPGs. I actually quit TTRPGs around 3.5 and just got back into it last year with 5th edition, and I think this opened the vault to those lost memories. So I might have some more for you. Well guys, I'm going to immediately say that I think the DM is probably the least guilty out of these 3, although he might have been the one to initially start the whole sexy D&D times. I don't know, I can't say. But he was at least considerate enough to offer the OP a different room for him to sober up and potentially not get murdered. Whether or not Specs is a little bit at fault here, I think you still gotta give him some kudos for that. But yeah, I would say a lot of this boils down to Black and Blonde for just not telling him, that their D&D experiences were not exactly the normal dungeon crawling, murdering monsters stuff. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and as always, have a good one.